We're gonna give a full disclaimer up front that we are both outside in different parts of our house. There will be a lot of, shall we call it, ambiance
There
for
you go.
this episode. There'll be ambiance.
Background,
Background,
participation,
yes.
background atmosphere.
Well, you don't want to keep moving it now because this part is going on YouTube.
Okay.
Just want to settle in.
All right.
How you feel?
Good. I feel good.
So I don't even know where to begin with this because we are doing a series on shaping love for Shaping the Shift. You are, I think, episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think.
Good number.
It's a good number. And I should start by just telling the world this is my husband, Mark Winkler, who you should already know that. But in case you didn't know that, that's who this is. And there was just no way to have this series or this conversation without the person who is probably definitely over the last decade and top 3 of my life because of my kids and family of origin, but shaped my definition of love and co-creates that definition with me every day. And so I wanted us to be here today, love, because I don't know if people often get to talk to couples who've been together for a period of time. It will be married 8 years in February, and we will have been together 11 years this year, right? I think somewhere around there. It's like 11 years. And so I think when I talk to like young people and students, and I mean, there's some who are very much, not into a very traditional prescribed, construct of love, who are kind of pushing against those kind of normative ideas. But there's a lot who have a very, very kind of fixed idea of what love is. And I'm not sure that you and I were immune to that, when we started our relationship. And we are in the process now of co-creating a definition for what we call expansive love that looks at how we grow as individuals and how we kind of revisit our sole purpose for each other and make sure that that is included in our definition of whatever this love is. Yeah. So, hot seat question for you. What is your current living definition of love?
It's a mixture of things, but I would say what is the most prominent in its evolution in my thoughts is that love is two people, individuals having separate individual experiences and somehow finding a way to share those experiences in a way that sustains and grows the love. And that's not always easy, right? Sometimes it is when it works out that the shared experiences are, they connect to both, right? That it resonates with both. And there's an experience of joy and wanting in the experiences. But there's sometimes the experience, collides with samskara, as Michael Singer says, which is a past hurt that's been unresolved. So the experience collides up against something that is unresolved, undealt with. And, that should be an opportunity for growth and, as you just said, expansion, but sometimes it's not. So, but I think if I had to whittle it down to a definition, I would say that it's two individuals having separate experiences and then sharing those experiences with one another.
Yeah. I think ideally that's it. And I think sometimes that sounds easier to do in theory than it is in
Spoiler
practice.
alert, it's not easy.
It's a good
So, if anyone is writing, this down, and they turn off this broadcast right there because they say, I got it. I hope they come back. I hope someone redirects them back to the other portions.
No, it's not easy. That's what I'm thinking. Like, theoretically, people will be like, oh, I can do that. But we're talking about the unknown, when you make that agreement with someone in a long-term commitment, you're agreeing to things you have no idea exist in a world where anything could exist, And so really the reality is you're agreeing to, like, I can be here and, love you and hold you through the known. But what happens when the unknown comes up? And I think you and I recently been listening to an episode with Laura London, a podcast with her and Angie Martinez. And, there were so many things she said in there that really struck me that I think people don't think about when they think about long-term love or just love in general, like that, how much ego is in the love we are taught versus that definition that you're describing, that definition that you are sharing, right?
It's ego, but it's also fear, right? Because we are given definitions of what, or a blueprint for what love is, or a blueprint of marriage, a blueprint of relationships. And there are benchmarks, there are, sort of things that we say this should happen and this should happen. And we set out on a course to follow that blueprint. But what happens is when the unknown does occur, and it does, right? And both versions, the thing I just said, the definition I just gave, and the definition that most people adhere to. When the unknown happens, what happens is because we're so tied to the expectations, because we're so tied to the belief systems around that dynamic of love that we've been taught, it creates a catastrophic sort of disturbance in us that most people don't overcome. Either they lose the relationship, they lose themselves in the relationship, they hurt themselves, or they hurt the other person in the relationship. So it's being tied to or all of the above, right? And then the more unfortunate situation when there's children involved. And so having, a release of that, but that's the part that's scary, because that means you're stepping into a dynamic with someone that you don't know what that looks like, as you just said, right? The other one, the blueprint, is comforting because at least you think you know.
Right. At least you're under the illusion that you know.
You're under the illusion that you know. But that causes, in the end, we've seen the results of that. The divorce rate is astronomical. People breaking up before they even really get to know each other.
And I find that a lot of people feel like they want to know all the possible variables up front, but the reality is you never will know that. It's impossible because we are constantly changing, because we're constantly evolving. It really is a daily renewal of that commitment. Like, really, that's why I asked, what is your current living definition of love, right? Because every day that I learn new things, that I experience new things, my definition somewhat changes, or the way I want to experience it changes. And so there has to be a level of flexibility and partnership to allow for that without fear and ego taking over, right? And then showing up in the form of ownership, control. In Tamika's episode, we talked a lot about proprietorship and the false sense of security that gives, right? This is my person, my thing, right? Because in that understanding, we don't believe love is everywhere and comes from everywhere, from that bird squeaking behind you, or that plant behind your head, or the plants around me. We don't believe that we can source love from everywhere. So when we find something to source it from, or someone, the fear of not having that source is so devastating, like you described. And honestly, the reality is, where did that person get the love that they're giving you, right? Like, they source that from the I am. They source that from nature. They source that from spirit. So you're really just having an experience with spirit through a person, but that is not how we are conditioned to think about love, right? And if that same spirit sent that person to offer you that, that's the same abundant spirit that exists, everywhere. So then it becomes about, I'm enjoying this experience with love with this person. I'm enjoying how I feel. I'm enjoying, and even when I'm not enjoying it, I can see my own growth and expansion, because it's not always about joy and enjoying it. It's sometimes the joy comes through growth in tough, crunchy moments, like you and I are really learning how to breathe through the discomfort and the crunchy parts. And we are finding that if we can do that, there is a really rich soil on the other side of that. But woo, you got to dig deep sometimes to get to that, that breath that gets you from one part to the other, because this is childhood stuff. You know what I'm saying? This is stuff from itty bitty, that you have to dig up in order to show up as unconditional love.
Yeah, unconditional love is, if we have like on a scale, right, there's the ultimate type of love, right? You love someone, in a way that doesn't impede their evolutionary evolvement, right? That's the ultimate goal, right? But that, and again, I want to just caution people that, because sometimes we hear people talking and we hear a concept and we want to, automatically start to implement this concept in our life, not realizing that, everything is a process, right? And within that process, there are practices to get you to the next stage of this process. So, you have to realize where you are in your evolvement, right? Because if you turn to your partner and say, I'm going to love you unconditionally, no matter what, you may have the idea and the wanting to do that, but there's something in you that says the whole world is, it's problematic. There's so much, unwanted energy in the world. And this is my haven. This relationship is my haven. So there's the possessiveness in that, right? And so I want this not to be disturbed, because this is going to be how we deal with that, right? And so you have that thought. And if you're operating from that, right, then it's difficult to move to this next stage.
Yeah.
But you can't be angry with yourself if you are operating from that sort of mindset, or a mindset that is a distance from unconditional love.
Yeah.
You just have to understand that it's a process.
Yeah.
Right? And I keep emphasizing that word, because we live in a very I want it now society. We live in a very, give it to me now. I can get it in 5-minute sound bites on Instagram or TikTok, and, or even a 30-minute, platform like this, message is being sent out. And it's impossible. It's impossible to get it after reading one book.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a journey, because life is a journey.
It's a
right?
commitment.
So
and
it's a
commitment. It's a discipleship. You really have to dedicate yourself. This is so.
But this one thing. But you have to decide that when you do it, you have to know that you're ready to do it. Right. So once
how
you
would
make
you know that?
Your body will tell you. Right. Your body. So there's agitation. There's joy. Right. There's that sort of, seesawing back and forth. But if it's only agitation, if it's only pain, then you have to say, well, there's work I need to do. So I can't continue in this dynamic until I work on myself. And that part is difficult, right? Because that may mean some sort of temporary or long-term separation. So you have to be ready when you make a commitment to love unconditionally. And
Yeah.
on that path, there's a sincerity that you must have about it. There's a wanting. You
Yeah.
have to want it, and you can't want it because the other person want it.
Yeah.
Right? That can't be your goal. I mean, that could be a starting point for you, but
Yeah.
if you months in or years in and you realize that that's the only reason you're doing
Yeah.
this is for the other person, what that will do is that will create the frustration and the resentment that you look back over months and years, and you only experience this because you were doing it for the other person.
Yeah. We're not going to edit out those birds because that's the ancient mothers just agreeing with everything you were saying. So we're going to
They're
leave
just
that
giving
in.
confirmation and
Yeah. Yeah.
affirmation.
They're like,
Thank you.
word.
Namaste with us for a minute.
There's so much I'd like to tease out in what you just said. So give me a moment with that. One is that healing, you can love each other and hurt each other deeply. And I think people think love is the absence of hurt, but we are still very messy humans that are trying to learn and unlearn many things at once. And so love is not necessarily the absence of wounds, right? And so in our scenario, we made a commitment to heal together, to heal individually while together. And and you were just talking about that a little bit about like when people are on these individual journeys, you have to offer yourself and the other person so much grace, more grace than you thought you were capable of. The love stretches you. The love deepens you. And sometimes you'll be like, is it love? Is it love? Is it codependency? Is it crazy? Like, what are we doing? Like, what is it? You will really question what it is. And I love what you said about the body, because that's kind of what it'll tell you. The thing grace will buoy you through the process of healing in real time with a partner who is equally as committed to healing and achieving a high level of love in your relationship. So that has to be there, and it has to be equitable. And that means that the person who does too much has to do a little less. And that means the person who's normally doing too little has to do a little bit more. And you both have to allow for that, right? You have to allow the dynamic to change, because if you're used to doing the most, then you have to learn to not do, which is hard. It sound like it'll be just so easy to relinquish, but it's really hard, because part of your overdoing in the first place is your way of feeling secure and safe in situations, which is like, I got it. So have you ever really relied on the other person? Has there really been room for them to show up as a partner where it mattered? Or were you always kind of controlling that part? And if you're the person who's been used to other people doing it, you got new muscles to work. And you're gonna wanna promise the world, but those muscles have not been working. You're not gonna have the legs for it. So that part you said about like not promising to do this out the gate is important, because if you promise it and the person believes it, every time you don't deliver, it erodes a little bit more of the trust. So you do have to think of it as a process, and you have to really, really humble yourself. Or you have to humble yourself to know, I'm not going to get this overnight, but I'm committed to the path. I'm committed to the journey,
And I think that's a.
Let me finish that last piece, because
okay, go ahead.
You said a lot in what you had said. I wanted to tease out a piece. No, it's good. I just wanted to tease out some of the things I don't want to forget, which is about the body. So we are a people in this country who are very disconnected from the body. And so our tendency is when we feel, we react. When we feel, we do. To get that emotion immediately off of us, immediately out of us. And who does that go to first? The person sleeping right next to us, right? And so learning to be an embodied individual, learning to sit with your feelings, to have relationship with them, to listen to what they're saying, to take a deep breath and to write it out, or to walk it out. You do a lot of walking, or to journal it out. I do a lot of journaling. We have to find ways to not project onto the partner, but to be with the emotions. Both of us are big fans of Tara Brach's work, Radical Acceptance. We both read it, and it continues to be something for us that allows us to recognize when that's happening. And it still happens, but we're able to, it happened this morning. And I had to be like, I'm sorry for assuming your mood, assuming that you were in a certain space. And I had to own that I was feeling uncomfortable with the idea that he might be uncomfortable, right? I know that sounds ridiculous, but overthinking is the death of this process, y'all. It is a very heart-centered, guttural process. And if you overthink it, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but I feel like every time we overthink, we leave the present, we leave what is real, we leave our definition, and we end up going right back into this kind of fixer, doer, projecting mode,
No, I agree. I mean, I think when you overthink about a situation,
and he's a Gemini, I just want to say that.
And so I do overthink.
Overthinking.
But what I'm learning is that overthinking from a problematic perspective is problematic, right?
Yes.
But when you think from a solution base or a love base or a joy base, you bring that energy towards you, right? So you can think all of those thoughts as much as you want, right? You can bring that energy as much as you want. And that helps to move you forward in a situation that may be difficult. Because when you are in a relationship and you're having these individual experiences, and an experience by one partner or the other brings in that collides against something, a belief system that you have, or a fear, or something that you feel you're not ready for, you have to begin to find ways to put yourself in a different frame of mind about it, right? You have to say, well, I'm thinking about it this way, but how can I think about it in a way that gives me the energy to continue to love this person who I love deeply, right? And that takes practice. And that's why I keep emphasizing the practice of this, right? Like we practice our religion, we pray, we give salutations, we do things, we give sacrifices, whatever practice or faith you or spirituality dynamic you come from. And so we have to look at love and relationships the same way, right?
As a practice and a process.
As a practice, right? But not in a way that is when we think about practice in a stressful way, but practice in a way that we are moving towards the part of the part of a relationship where the joy exists, right? And it's always there. But we do things that separate us from that, right? And so we have to begin to practice the things that move us towards that. You said something a couple of seconds ago about, when a person is saying something and doing something, they have to be conscious of not, when they say, oh, I'm ready to do this, right?
Not overpromising.
Not overpromising, right? And I think that I agree with that, and I want to push back against a little bit, right? A person may, in their now, right, say, this is what I want to do, right? And there may be so much energy around them that can conceive of no other thought but doing this. 2 months, 2 seconds, or 2 blocks down the road, something happens that hits that samskara, right? And then they say, well, right? And they may fall into this moment, right? And so I think that, yes, I do agree. I think that you should be temperate in what you promise, right?
Yeah.
But in your enthusiasm, right? You don't want to douse your own enthusiasm by putting doubt in what you were feeling at that moment, right? And so you can say things like, at this moment, I feel this. In this moment, I feel like I can do this, right? And the other person who's hearing this can receive that information and say, you know what? I know that life is a roller coaster, right? So I'm going to, as you mentioned, grace, I'm going to receive this information now and know that there may be something that stumbles them down the road, right? But as long as I can see that they are trying to quickly recover, then I will give grace, if that's the word to use in this sentence, that they are sincere, right? But I do it. So it's a balance, right? You don't want to.
No, yeah, I think it's both and. That's what we're talking about. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's very tender
Yes.
because when you're trying to rebuild trust,
Mm-hmm.
words have a lot of significance.
Mm-hmm.
And and it's just a very delicate thing to overpromise.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
almost, if you're the person who's been wounded by the lack of
Mm-hmm.
trust,
Mm-hmm.
you'd rather hear like, this is my goal, this is what I'm working towards, then I
Mm-hmm.
absolutely will never da 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 da, because that enthusiasm will lead you to use absolutes, will lead you to say,
Mm-hmm.
and you want the person who's making the absolutes wants the other person to say, all right, I'm on board, I trust you completely.
Right.
They want
Right.
that from you.
Right.
But if you give that
Mm-hmm.
and then there's a
Mm-hmm.
fumble,
Mm-hmm.
you set it up that way.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so I
Mm-hmm.
think what we're saying is it is a process, it is a practice, and you're agreeing to navigate it together. So we all have to be temperate. We
Mm-hmm.
all have to be temperate. I would say, stay away from absolutes.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, when you overpromise, it's for you, but it's not for the other person, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And
Mm-hmm.
so if that's your aspiration, you can write that in a journal. You can say
Mm-hmm.
that on a video journal, but
Mm-hmm.
word is bond. If you want
Mm-hmm.
this person to like believe the words that come out of your mouth consistently, word gotta be bond. You know what I'm saying? Now different personalities, this may vary relationship to relationship, person
Mm-hmm.
to person, situation to situation, for sure. But I think this is what we're saying, right? We had to figure this out for ourselves. Like we had to figure out, and sometimes, not to quote myself, but in butterflies, there's a part where I say, are there only some questions in life that we get the answers to by us going through the actual experiences? Love is one of those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Love, every single person I've had on this podcast that I've asked their definition of love has had a different definition.
Mm-hmm.
And that's love. Love
Mm-hmm.
is diverse. And it changes and it evolves. And so the reality is like finding someone that is willing to be in that process with you, be present, be graceful. Right
Mm-hmm.
now, we are practicing 30 days of forgiveness. And so people who are willing to do that, with you are keepers. Like you're a keeper, Mark Winkler, because
That's the
we
rumor.
that's the rumor, because we have been, you know, dancing. Well, I'll tell you, Mark, a moment this last year that I knew no matter how this redefining, this evolving, expanding, decolonizing love experience, how turbulent or how difficult it could be, is on like one of our roughest nights, one of our roughest evenings. We showed up for each other with so much compassion. Like we checked on each other and we reached for each other. And it was a night where easily we could have just fell into our own wounds and just held ourselves in our corner of the bed. But that's not what happened. And I knew that instinctually, the way that we love each other is to reach for each other and check on each other, even when we are hurting. And that meant a lot to me. That was important.
Yeah. 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 I Not gonna make me cry, right?
I'm
So
actually, Mark is a bit of a crier.
I get that from my grandfather. Um, I When we talk about, just throwing back for a second, um, about over promising, I think that the person who is making the promises, they have to find a way not to operate from fear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, Fear of loss,
Mm-hmm.
fear of hurt, because what that will do is it will interrupt your ability to proceed in what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because I believe when a person is sincere and they make a declaration,
Mm-hmm.
that is their sincere goal, right? I believe one of the greatest impediments to succeeding is fear, right? Fear of loss. Tara Brach actually talked about this. You mentioned Tara Brach, and it's really the fear of death, really, but death comes in many different forms, right? So it's really the fear that you have to start to figure out how to walk through in a way that you dance with that fear. You have relationships with that fear. You get to understand where that fear is emanating from and how you can use that fear and then turn that fear into more of a pathway for you to continue your journey on what you have made a declaration to yourself and to your partner. So I really think that that's important because, as I speak these things that I'm saying, I'm speaking from a perspective of someone who's actually walking this walk, right? And because I wouldn't say anything that I am not myself actually doing, right? Because that would just be articulation, that would just be mental masturbation or whatever. It'd be falsehood, right? And so as I grow, and anyone who I'm in company with, I want to try to co-create moments where I grow and they grow. And so in relationship with you, that's what I want. So I just felt that was important because I know people who hear this and hopefully they're listening and not turning off at a point that they just figure, I got it. But they're actually going through this conversation journey that if they are making promises like this, to know that their fear will come up. And then when that comes up, try and deal with the fear from a perspective of why is it happening? Why is it coming up? Things that you have told me and I've read and experienced. And then before you bring the fear into the relationship, do your best to try to work through it as much as you can.
Mm-hmm.
So your partner can continue to believe in your declarations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We've shared that this is not an easy thing, but I do believe I speak for both of us, and I'll let Mark speak for himself when we say that it is worth it. I am experiencing a type of love with you that I didn't know if we'd reach there. And it's been worth every crunchy conversation, every moment of honesty, every unveiling, unearthing. I've learned so much about myself in trying to learn how to love you healthier and better. Like, I'm learning to witness and not intervene. I'm learning to trust your spirit as much as I trust my spirit. I'm learning that I'm not just loved because of what I do, and that all of me can be loved and accepted. And those are things I didn't know. I didn't know those things a year ago. I'm so grateful for every I mean, there's been so many moments, and in the moment you're not grateful. In the moment you're like, we resist discomfort, we resist truth, we resist pain, we resist crying, we resist hurting the other person, we resist truth because we don't want to hurt the other person, we resist hearing the truth because we don't want to be hurt. Like it's like walking through landmines for sure. But the only way to make it through the landmines is to kind of reach back and hold each other's hand and learn from and depend on each other and what is in each other, you know? Um, and so, grace, being present, staying open,
Mhm.
allowing old things to die, new things to be reborn. Forgiveness, 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 1,000 times
Mhm.
forgiveness. For self, too, for the ways in which you co-created what you're in,
Mhm.
because it's never one person.
Mhm.
Um, and then harness that power and create something different, you know?
Mhm.
Um, would you say it's worth it, Mark Winkler?
Yeah, I would. Um, the love that I have for you is, you know, it's it's at times it's unexplainable to me, right? And I'm not saying that in some sort of rom-com sort of way. It's unexplainable because, you know, I am moving through life and moving through experiences that I, did not think I would and I did not anticipate. But, as I climb through levels of discomfort and go deeper into the unknown,
Mm,
um, when I look over at you, I can't see you not being there,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Oh, I know. I know.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful um, for where we are and who we are.
Yeah.
And, like everything else we've ever been through, not just as a couple, as a family, we're a blended family, um, but as individuals, there's never been anything that Spirit has brought in our path that we didn't use to help others. Never.
Mhm.
And I know even this is about that, even this means like, a couple years, people will need this information, this data that we're living, and
Mhm.
that you and I will be more than happy to offer it. And maybe this is just the first little peek at that. Um, I I feel so full. I'm so grateful you came on today. And do you have any last pieces of advice you want to offer before we close?
Just say, you know, if you're in a relationship with someone and you love that person, just, work towards loving them in an unconditional way. You may not even know what that looks like, but you will feel it. You will feel the absence more and more of tension, the absence of resentment,
Mm,
and you'll feel the presence of joy and peace. And I would say that just know that that's not going to happen overnight,
yeah.
right? Know that that will create, moments where you feel I can't do this.
Mhm.
You know? But if you can look over at the person while you're on this journey and you can honestly say, I love this person during each stage of this.
Mm,
And that when you say the words, it resonates with a feeling in you that you know that you're not just saying the words,
yeah.
but your body is feeling the words. Then keep going,
Keep going.
keep going.
Okay, we're gonna end here because Mark has to come up here and kiss and hug his wife. So I love you all, but we got to go. Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.